They dismissed her, ignored her, even called security, all before realizing they were about to deny service to the one person who could destroy their careers in an instant. Margaret Collins, a decorated war veteran, just wanted to board her flight. But the crew saw an elderly black woman, not a hero. What they didn't see? The owner of the airline, Elijah Carter, watching everything unfold, undercover. And when the truth came out, let's just say, they never saw it coming. Margaret Collins adjusted the strap of her worn travel bag and stepped up to the check-in counter, gripping her boarding pass with steady hands. She had flown plenty of times before, but today felt different. At 78 years old, she wasn't here for leisure. She was heading to Washington, D.C., for a long-overdue recognition of her service, a ceremony honoring black veterans who had served in the military despite the odds. She wasn't one for grand celebrations, but this invitation mattered. As she approached the counter, Margaret kept her expression neutral. She had learned long ago not to expect much, not kindness, not fairness, and certainly not special treatment. All she wanted was the seat she paid for, seat 14B, on a direct flight to Washington. The gate agent, a young woman named Lauren, greeted her with a rehearsed smile, the kind that never quite reached her eyes. Margaret handed over her ticket, waiting as Lauren scanned it. That's when it happened. The smile faltered. Lauren's fingers hesitated on the keyboard. Her gaze flickered toward Margaret's ID, lingering for a beat too long. Margaret had seen that look before. "Just one moment, ma'am," Lauren said, forcing her polite expression back into place. She stepped away from the counter, boarding pass still in hand. Margaret didn't argue. She had faced worse in her lifetime. Instead, she stepped aside, her grip tightening around her cane as she shifted her weight. She could wait. Behind her, the steady hum of airport chatter filled the space. Families discussing plans, business travelers typing away on laptops, flight attendants moving between gates. But someone else was watching. Elijah Carter, dressed casually in jeans and a plain black hoodie, leaned against a nearby pillar, pretending to scroll through his phone. He had been keeping an eye on the gate for the past 20 minutes, unnoticed. To anyone else, he was just another passenger waiting for his flight. But Elijah wasn't just a passenger. He was the CEO and owner of Carter Airways, the very airline Margaret was trying to board. This was how he ran his company, by blending in, observing, and seeing how his employees treated customers when no one was watching. And right now, what he was seeing didn't sit right with him. Margaret's ticket had been scanned like everyone else's. So why was she still waiting? Elijah watched as Lauren reappeared from the back office, her expression tight. She cleared her throat and looked Margaret in the eye. "I'm so sorry, ma'am, but it seems your seat has been reassigned," Lauren said, her voice overly apologetic. "We're currently overbooked. We'll have to put you on a later flight." Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line. She had dealt with delays before. She had dealt with dismissive attitudes before. But something about this didn't feel like a simple mistake. Elijah saw it too. His jaw tightened as he stepped forward, blending into the boarding line. He wasn't going to intervene just yet. Not until he saw how far they were willing to go. Elijah Carter didn't build his airline by sitting behind a desk. He never trusted polished reports or carefully worded emails about customer service improvements. He believed in seeing the truth for himself. So here he was, standing in the middle of the boarding area, blending in as just another passenger in a black hoodie and jeans, observing everything. And what he saw? It didn't sit right with him. Margaret Collins, a 78-year-old black veteran, had handed over her ticket at the counter nearly 15 minutes ago. And yet, she still wasn't on the plane. At first, Elijah had given the employees the benefit of the doubt. Mistakes happened. Sometimes things took time. But then he started noticing the details. Other passengers in line, some who had checked in after Margaret, were handed their boarding passes and allowed to walk straight through. The gate agent smiled at them, made small talk, processed them without issue. Margaret, however, was still waiting. The agent, Lauren, avoided eye contact as she typed something into the computer. She whispered to her coworker, a young man named Bryce, who cast a quick glance at Margaret before leaning in closer. Elijah moved a few steps forward, pretending to check his phone as he listened in. "It's easier this way. She'll just hold up the line." His grip on his phone tightened. Easier for who? Elijah's mind flashed back to his grandfather, a proud man who had fought in the Korean War and returned home to find that despite his service, he was still treated as a second-class citizen. Margaret deserved better than this. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to remain calm. Not yet. Elijah could have walked up to the counter right then and there, pulled out his company ID, and shut this down. But if he did, they'd scramble. They'd apologize. They'd rush to fix things because suddenly, someone with power was watching. Number. He wanted to see how far they were willing to go. Margaret finally spoke, her voice calm but firm. I booked this seat a month ago. I need to be in Washington today, not tomorrow. Lauren sighed dramatically, as if Margaret was an inconvenience rather than a paying customer. I understand that, ma'am, she said, her tone dripping with false politeness. But the flight is overbooked, and we had to make adjustments. We can put you on a flight tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning? Elijah knew for a fact that wasn't standard protocol. If a flight was overbooked, they were supposed to ask for volunteers first. They were supposed to offer compensation. They were supposed to handle it better than this. Margaret didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. But Elijah saw the way her shoulders tensed. She had faced this before, and she knew that more often than not, there was no winning. Elijah exhaled slowly. Enough. He took a step forward, his expression neutral. Excuse me, he said, keeping his voice calm. What seems to be the issue? Lauren glanced at him, barely acknowledging his presence. No issue, sir. We're just assisting this passenger. Elijah raised an eyebrow. By denying her seat? Lauren stiffened slightly, caught off guard by his directness. Margaret turned, looking at Elijah with mild surprise. She hadn't expected anyone to step in. It's fine, son, she said softly. I'll figure it out. But Elijah wasn't about to let this go. Not now. Because this wasn't just about Margaret anymore. It was about every customer they had treated this way before, and about what was going to happen next. Margaret Collins stood silently, her hands resting lightly on the handle of her cane, as one passenger after another breezed past her, handing over their tickets and boarding without issue. No extra checks, no extra questioning, no hesitation. Just her. Elijah Carter leaned against a nearby pillar, observing everything. His fingers tapped lightly against his phone, his expression unreadable. At first, he had been willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe it was a simple mistake. Maybe there was a minor system error. Maybe, just maybe, this was nothing. But now, he could see it clear as day. The whispers, the exchanged glances, the unnecessary delay, and most importantly, the way they were acting like Margaret didn't belong. Lauren, the gate agent, finally returned, but she wasn't alone this time. A man in a navy suit walked beside her. Derek Lawson, the shift manager, mid-40s, with the kind of expression that screamed, I'm in charge here. He carried Margaret's ID between two fingers, holding it with the same detached authority as a judge reading out a verdict. Elijah clenched his jaw. He had seen this before. Derek stopped directly in front of Margaret, offering a forced smile. Ma'am, is this your first time flying with us? He asked, his voice polite but patronizing. Margaret's eyes narrowed slightly. No, she said evenly. I've flown many times before. Her tone was controlled, but Elijah noticed the slight shift in her posture, the way she braced herself. She knew exactly what this was. And Elijah? So did he. He could hear what Derek was really saying. Do you even belong here? That was it. The moment things changed. Elijah forced himself to remain still, but every instinct in him screamed to step in. I'm sorry for the inconvenience, Derek continued, his tone syrupy and fake. But we need to verify some details before allowing you to board. Margaret arched an eyebrow, unimpressed. What kind of details? Derek hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. And that was all Elijah needed to see. They didn't have a real reason. They were stalling. They were hoping Margaret would sigh, accept their excuse, and walk away quietly. But they didn't know who was watching. Margaret let out a slow, patient breath, her face unreadable. I gave you my ID. I checked in. I have my ticket. What else do you need? Lauren, the gate agent, shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Derek glanced at her, then made his mistake. He looked Margaret up and down. It was quick, subtle, but it was there. Elijah recognized it instantly. We just need to confirm a few things, ma'am, Derek said smoothly. Margaret held his gaze. Like what? Silence. For the first time, Derek didn't have an immediate answer. And in that moment, Elijah had heard enough. His fingers curled into a fist at his side, but he kept his expression neutral. This had gone far enough. Now it was time for them to learn exactly who they were messing with. Derek leaned in slightly, his forced smile stretching at the corners of his mouth. We need further verification. His tone was calm, measured, but Elijah wasn't fooled. This wasn't about security. This wasn't about a policy. This was about making Margaret justify her presence. Margaret, to her credit, remained poised. She didn't flinch. She had seen this before, too many times. Without hesitation, she reached into her small purse and pulled out everything they could possibly need. Her ID? Given. Her ticket confirmation? Provided. Her payment receipt? Handed over. Everything was flawless. Everything was in order. Derek took it all, scanned each piece of information, then, without missing a beat, shook his head. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we still can't clear you for this flight." Elijah felt his blood run hot. There was no reason to deny her. None. The energy in the room shifted. The murmurs began. Some passengers shifted uncomfortably. Some threw Margaret a sympathetic glance. Others, perhaps feeling guilty, looked away, pretending not to see. But then, the unthinkable happened. Derek turned to the nearest attendant and gave a small, careless wave. "Call security." A uniformed guard, broad shoulders, blank expression, hand resting near his belt, stepped forward immediately. Margaret tightened her grip on her cane. Not out of fear, not even close, but out of exhaustion. She had seen this before. A lifetime of being questioned, dismissed, second-guessed. And now, here, in a place that should have respected her, in a place where she had paid for her seat, followed every rule, done everything right. But still, she was being treated like a problem to be removed. Elijah's heartbeat thundered in his ears. He had wanted to stay quiet, to watch, to see how far they would take this. But this was enough. Slowly, deliberately, Elijah stepped forward. The guard barely glanced at him, his focus locked on Margaret. Derek, on the other hand, his eyes flicked toward Elijah for only a second, probably assuming he was just another nosy passenger about to complain. But Elijah wasn't a passenger. He was their worst nightmare. His voice was calm, controlled, but firm. "Is there a reason this woman isn't being allowed to board?" Derek barely looked at him. "Sir, this doesn't concern you." "Wrong answer. Dead wrong." Elijah's eyes darkened. "That's where you're mistaken," he said smoothly. "It concerns me very much." Margaret turned slightly, eyeing him with curiosity. Something about the way he spoke, the quiet confidence, the authority in his tone, gave her pause. He wasn't just some bystander. Derek let out an exasperated sigh. "Sir, please return to your seat. We are handling this." Elijah let out a small, humorless laugh. "Handling it?" he echoed. "That's an interesting choice of words." Derek crossed his arms. "Look, I don't know what you think you're doing, but we have protocols. And this passenger," Elijah cut him off, "has followed every single one of them." Derek's jaw tensed. Elijah took another step forward. "Tell me, Derek," he continued, his voice sharper now. "If she's missing something, why haven't you been able to say exactly what it is?" Derek blinked. For the first time, hesitation flickered across his face. Elijah tilted his head. "Or better yet," he continued, his tone dangerously low, "why is she the only one being put through this process?" Silence. The tension in the room spiked. Lauren, the gate agent, shifted uncomfortably. The guard hesitated. Margaret? Margaret just watched. She had no idea who this man was. But she knew one thing for sure. Derek Lawson was in trouble, and she had a feeling this was about to get very interesting. Elijah doesn't argue. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't need to. Instead, he pulls out his phone. A small, simple movement, but the effect is instant. The moment the camera lens catches the light, the entire energy in the room shifts. Derek, the manager, visibly tenses. The security guard stiffens. The gate agent? She goes pale. Margaret watches it all, quiet, composed. She doesn't know who this man is, but she knows power when she sees it. And this man? He has it. Elijah holds his phone up, steady, deliberate. Then, in a voice so calm it feels dangerous, he asks one simple question. "Are you denying this woman access to her own seat because of airline policy?" His eyes sharpen. "Or because of what she looks like?" Silence. A heavy, crushing silence. The kind that makes people sweat. Derek blinks, opens his mouth, closes it again. The security guard shifts, for the first time, hesitating. Lauren, the gate agent, looks like she wants to disappear. Passengers stare now, some holding their phones up too. The whispers spread. What's going on? Is he recording? Did she do something wrong? Derek finally finds his voice. "Sir, please," he starts, but his tone cracks. Elijah's gaze doesn't waver. "Answer the question." Derek tries again. This is a misunderstanding. Elijah doesn't blink. No, Derek, it's not. Derek swallows, his throat bobbing. Sir, I just need to confirm her information. Elijah tilts his head. Slow, calculated. She gave you her ID, her ticket, her receipt. What exactly needs to be confirmed? Derek flounders. He knows there's no good answer. Elijah gives him a second, just to watch him struggle. Then, the final blow. The words that change everything. Elijah lowers the phone just slightly. Not enough to stop recording. Just enough to make his next words land. I'm Elijah Carter. A pause. A beat. Then, I own this airline. The color drains from Derek's face. Lauren's mouth drops open. The security guard? He takes an immediate step back. Margaret? Margaret just raises an eyebrow. The weight of who this man is, what he just said, hits the room like a thunderclap. And suddenly, everyone realizes their jobs are hanging by a thread. Lauren stutters first. Mr. Carter, sir, I didn't realize. Elijah cuts her off. You didn't realize? What exactly didn't you realize, Lauren? Lauren's mouth snaps shut. Derek tries to regain control. Sir, I assure you. Assure me? Elijah steps forward, his presence towering. Derek, I watched you deny this woman her seat while every other passenger boarded without an issue. I heard the whispers. I saw the looks. I saw how you dismissed her like she was nothing. The security guard adjusts his stance, uncomfortable. Derek tries one more time. We were just following policy, sir. Elijah laughs. A single, humorless laugh. Policy? Policy? His voice doesn't rise, but the fury is unmistakable. Tell me, Derek, does policy only apply when the passenger looks like her? Derek freezes. His entire body goes rigid. Because now, there's no escape. Passengers are still watching. Phones are still recording. Margaret stands there, unwavering. And Elijah? Elijah is just getting started. He takes another step forward, gaze locked onto Derek. I have one question left. Derek swallows hard. Do you still want to deny her seat? Derek looks at Lauren. Lauren looks at the security guard. The security guard looks at the floor. Finally, Derek shakes his head. No, sir. Elijah's voice is sharp. No. What? Derek swallows again. No, sir. She can take her seat. Elijah lets the words hang in the air. Then slowly, he turns to Margaret. Mrs. Collins, would you like your seat? Margaret smiles softly. I believe I would, son. The tension snaps. Passengers begin murmuring. Some clap. Some glare at Derek. Lauren slinks away. The security guard steps aside. Margaret grips her cane, lifts her chin, and walks forward. Elijah watches her go, then turns back to Derek. We're not done here. Derek nods stiffly. But he knows. It's over. And for him, this was only the beginning. Within hours, corporate is notified. Within minutes, an emergency meeting is called. By the end of the day, Derek is fired. But Elijah doesn't stop there. This wasn't just about one bad manager. This wasn't about one mistake. This was about a culture he refused to let exist in the company he built. So, he goes deeper. He orders a full-scale investigation into every branch of his airline. He wants reports. He wants data. He wants names. Because if this could happen to Margaret Collins, a decorated veteran, a woman who had given her life to serving her country, then who else had been treated this way? Elijah personally reads every report. And what he finds? It's worse than he imagined. Elderly passengers denied priority boarding for no reason. Veterans overlooked for seat upgrades, while others received them easily. Travelers who didn't fit the airline's preferred image, conveniently delayed, questioned, dismissed. It wasn't policy. It was prejudice. And that was unacceptable. So Elijah makes a decision that shakes the entire airline industry. He restructures policies from the ground up. He reinstates mandatory training, not just the usual customer service nonsense, but real, intensive training on bias awareness, accountability, and dignity. Every single employee, from the executives to the newest gate agent, is required to attend. And if they don't, they're out. Word spreads fast. The media catches wind of it. Passengers start sharing their own experiences. Some good, but too many? Too many sound like Margaret's. And at the heart of it all, one woman, one moment. That changed everything. Margaret hears about the changes. She watches interviews, reads headlines, sees Elijah Carter standing at podiums, looking more determined than ever. She smiles. Not because she needed the recognition, not because she wanted revenge, but because for the first time in a long time, she knows her story mattered. And Elijah, he never forgets. Because from that day forward, every time an elderly passenger steps onto one of his planes, every time a veteran is greeted with respect, not suspicion, he remembers her. Margaret Collins, the woman who changed his entire airline, and maybe the entire industry. Elijah isn't just fixing policies. He's building something. Something that will outlast him. Something that ensures what happened to Margaret Collins never happens again. So, he does more than issue apologies. More than fire bad employees. More than just change policy. He launches something bigger. The Honor Flight Initiative. Effective immediately. Veterans receive priority boarding. First-class upgrades, free of charge, when available. Personalized recognition from the airline staff. But Elijah? He isn't done yet. 2 months later, Elijah invites Margaret to the airport. No explanation, no details. Just a simple message. Be here. You won't regret it. Margaret arrives, leaning on her cane, feeling out of place. The terminal is buzzing. Employees, veterans, cameras. A small stage has been set up in front of a massive aircraft, covered with a banner. Margaret frowns, confused. "What's all this?" she murmurs. Then she sees him. Elijah Carter, standing tall, smiling. The crowd quiets as he steps onto the stage. He speaks, his voice strong, steady. "We're here today because of one woman." He turns to Margaret. A woman who faced disrespect and stood tall anyway. A ripple of applause. Margaret grips her cane, embarrassed. She didn't do anything special. Did she? Elijah continues. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't demand anything. But she didn't back down either. And because of her, we changed. Elijah gestures toward the massive aircraft behind him. But words aren't enough. He nods, and the banner drops. The crowd gasps. Margaret's breath catches. Painted across the body of the plane, in bold, gleaming letters. Margaret Collins, a legacy of strength. Margaret freezes. Her hands tremble. Her vision blurs with tears. This question mark. This isn't real. She looks at Elijah, her voice unsteady. I don't deserve all this. Elijah steps forward, and he smiles. Yes, you do. Margaret swallows, staring at the plane. Her name, on an aircraft. A plane that will carry veterans. A plane that will honor their stories. A plane that will ensure their sacrifices are never forgotten. She blinks away the tears. For the first time in years, she feels seen, truly seen. Later that evening, Margaret sits by the window watching the sunset glow against the airport runway. The aircraft, her aircraft, prepares for its inaugural flight. And as its wheels leave the ground, as it soars into the sky, Margaret smiles. Because today, she didn't just take a flight. She became part of something bigger, and her legacy would never be ignored again.